It is possible to become free from debt, financial worry, your boss, and your zip code. You can start living a life you love, but first, you need to find your freedom. Using financial independence and lifestyle design principles, you can create the life of your dreams now. There are many paths to freedom, and that is what this podcast is all about. My name is Becky from 20free.co, and I am the host of the Find Your Freedom podcast. This episode is all about how COVID-19 has affected nomads and travelers. So today I'm sharing two interviews where I check in with former podcast guests Alicia Walter from the Passport Couple, who was interviewed in episode 8, and Michelle from Frugality and Freedom, who was interviewed in episode 6. Both were abroad from their home countries as the coronavirus spread globally and travel bans were implemented. I talked to both Alicia and Michelle on March 31st. I reached out to them to see how they were doing because, as a frequent traveler myself, I was really curious about how true nomads were being affected. Personally, I had just returned from a trip to Costa Rica on March 1st. Before I departed in February, someone mentioned to wipe down the airplane seats because of the coronavirus, but that was actually the first time I had heard of it. During my travels in Costa Rica, I was hearing about more and more cases worldwide, and the first cases in the United States, where I am from. Luckily, my return travel was not affected. But as the situation evolved, I started to get worried about my friends who live abroad and were traveling full-time. Alicia, who is originally from the United States, was in Cambodia, her latest destination as she and her boyfriend traveled full-time through Southeast Asia. She and her boyfriend quit their jobs in late 2019 and left California to travel full-time and build a travel brand just 2 months before the global pandemic. They are now stuck in their hotel in Cambodia, waiting out the travel bans until they can start traveling again in Asia. Michelle, who is originally from Australia, was in New Zealand, working a local contract position and house sitting. She works in the events field and was running an event that ended up needing to be canceled partway through due to coronavirus concerns. She had to make the quick decision to leave New Zealand and return to her home base in Australia, where she followed mandatory self-quarantine for 14 days. Alicia and Michelle tell me all about what their decision processes were, the financial impacts they faced as travelers, and what it was like being abroad as the coronavirus situation developed really quickly. Let's get to the interviews. So I'm catching up with Alicia from the Passport Couple right now. She was our guest on episode 8 of the Find Your Freedom podcast, and I wanted to reach back out to her and check in and see what's going on. Things have changed since we last talked. You and your partner started traveling full-time, so tell me a little bit about when that started and what your life looked like earlier this year.
Yeah, so actually when we talked, it was late last year, and we were already like full swing planning everything, but we hadn't told my boyfriend's job yet, hadn't really like told all of our friends and family yet, so it was still like in the planning phases. But at the beginning of this year, Nate, my boyfriend, he ended up leaving his job and we left our apartment, sold everything we own. All of our belongings are literally in this hotel room with us right now. And we took off on February 2nd to just travel for as long as we possibly can. Currently, we have enough plans right now for a year, but with the way the world is changing, it may be longer, maybe shorter. So we'll see.
So you left on February 2nd, and when did COVID-19 start being a concern in Southeast Asia, which is the area of the world that you were traveling in?
Obviously, COVID-19 started and the whole breakout was in China, which is relatively close to where we are. And I remember in January, we were staying with my parents for about 2-3 weeks. And it started popping up on the news here and there, like, oh, there's finally a case at LAX. And we're like, oh, like just another flu, right? Like, no, we were totally wrong. But so my parents were like, oh, just be careful. Like, just like with any illness or whatever, just be careful. And so when we were getting our vaccines, actually, because we had to get a ton of vaccines before we came out here, we were asking the lady, like, oh, is there going to be a vaccine for this new virus? We've been hearing all about it. And she's like, honestly, like it'll take a very long time before there's any sort of vaccine, but definitely just keep your eye out and stay safe. And we landed in Bangkok, Thailand first for a week. And it started, a lot of people were wearing masks. When we started going into malls, they were taking our temperatures. They had hand sanitizer stations everywhere. Things were definitely starting to pick up and change. And within a couple of weeks, things definitely changed a lot more.
So you left from Southern California. Did you end your lease and you're totally out of your apartment now? Are you subletting? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we had an apartment in San Diego and our lease just ended at the end of the year. So we started coming up with this idea about August of last year. And we're like, well, we could leave now, but then we'd have to get out of our lease. I can't miss holidays with my family, so we'd have to come back for that. So we're just kind of planning with what made most like financial sense, what made most sense like to our timeline. And we're like, we'll just wait till our lease is up. We won't renew it and we'll just leave. So yeah, we're basically homeless. We don't have like a home to go back to. So that was part of our decision with going home or staying here with everything changing with the coronavirus, because we don't really have a place to go back to.
That was my next question. So what factored in? Did you guys have the conversation around, are we going to go back? Are we going to stay here? What were those factors?
Yeah, so we were actually in Kuala Lumpur at the beginning of this month in Malaysia, and the city was pretty much dead. And we haven't been paying attention to news much, besides like the major headlines. And obviously, coronavirus is coming up more and more. But we had a flight planned to Siem Reap when we got here on March 10th.
In Cambodia.
All of a sudden, like things changed drastically. Like borders were shutting down, and we had plans. We had flight. We had our Airbnb booked already for April 6th in Bali, and we're like, our flight got canceled. We got emails from all of the countries, all of the Airbnb, everything, just saying like, hey, the world's shutting down basically. So you need to come home or you need to stay where you are for an indefinite period of time. Luckily, we really like our hotel, and the people that are taking care of our hotel have been so accommodating and so hospitable to us, and we really feel like safe here. So we did decide to stay here just because we'd be going back and staying with my parents in Southern California, where the craze is a lot more. Grocery store shelves are empty, like toilet paper is out, like that's not happening here at all. So we can still go grocery shopping. And then getting a flight home was near impossible because we're in Siem Reap. It's a much smaller airport than say if we're in Bangkok or Tokyo. Getting a flight home would be a lot easier from there, but we'd have to stop about 2 or 3 times in countries that weren't letting people in. So the likelihood of our flights being canceled again was much higher, and the flight costs were just astronomical at that point. So we have decided to stay here indefinitely.
Well, at least you knew the area that you were in instead of potentially getting stuck on a layover in a country that you didn't want to be in or that you were not familiar with.
Right.
That could have been worse.
Yeah.
So how are you making sure that you're staying healthy and safe while you're abroad?
So we've been taking a lot of precautions. We have our hand sanitizers with us, and we're always careful with what we touch and who we interact with. And we're on the lookout for any signs of symptoms or anything like that. And we have been taking like lots of vitamins and vitamin C and multivitamins and just staying healthy as much as we can. And we've been working out and getting outside as much as we can too, because it can be pretty easy just to stay in bed in a dark room all day with all of this going on. But just getting outside and like working our bodies, we have been working out like every single day since we've been in quarantine, which is a very big change for us.
It's such a good thing to exercise daily when you're kind of stuck, not necessarily inside, but you don't really have that much movement or that much social interaction. I find it's making me a lot happier, when I feel kind of depressed because I feel like I've just been in my house for like a whole week. Working out really helps boost my mood. So I'm glad to hear you guys are doing that. So we don't know how long this is going to last, and you don't know how long you're going to be there. Can we talk finances? You have planned financially for this trip, and it's not like you're paying a mortgage or a lease back home. Is it actually less expensive for you to live where you are right now than it would be for you to be in San Diego?
Yes, 100%. I mean, if we had gone back, we'd be living with my parents, so it'd be cheaper in that sense. But had we stayed in San Diego, because we were both in the hospitality industry, which is taking a massive hit right now. So I was in sales. So a large part of my salary is coming from commissions. So getting that would be near impossible right now. And it would just be a lot more difficult for us to stay where we were, especially in San Diego. Rent prices were insane and commuting prices are insane. But here, it's much, much cheaper for us to be living. And it's honestly cheaper for us now being stuck in one place than traveling like we were, because we were starting to pick up the pace, traveling about once every 10 to 14 days, which includes flights and transportation from the airport and transportation around the town to all the activities and all the activities costs. So it's honestly cheaper for us right now. All we're paying for is our hotel and groceries. So it's been a lot cheaper for us to just stay put for a little bit.
That's good. That's good to hear that it's not more financially stressful to be stuck where you are. Do you feel stuck? Do you have any anxiety around not being able to leave at this moment? Or are you pretty happy with where you are and kind of being able to travel this little bit?
It's kind of been surreal for us. Like, we don't feel stuck in the country. We don't feel like we can't get home. We've been gone now for almost 2 months. So it's not a strange feeling for us to not be in a place that we consider home. We kind of just make each hotel or Airbnb that we've been in a homey feel. We unpack everything and we put stuff like we like it. And honestly, what's been helping me a lot in this hotel specifically is the natural light that we've been getting. So our windows face south, so we get light throughout the entire day, and we have huge windows. So just having like that natural light in our hotel room makes me feel like a lot more open, and that I can like go do something if I really need to. But we also have a balcony that we're able to just go outside on, and we can still walk around here, although it is unbearably hot, but at least we have those options.
Do you have any regrets then about quitting your jobs and starting your full-time travel, given that this was a totally unexpected event that happened that derailed your plans somewhat?
Yeah, definitely no regrets, but it has been funny talking to my family at home. They're like, wow, what a time to choose to go be like travel bloggers out in the world that you can no longer travel in. Nate actually related it to the 2008 financial crisis. Like, we just graduated college, and a month after, like, the financial crisis hit. And it feels like that a little bit, but we're trying to find the opportunity in it. It's been really nice for us to just find a routine that works for us, because so much of this is new to us. The traveling, the business, being together 24/7 is new to us. So it's been really nice to find a routine and really work on the admin side of stuff rather than getting out there and trying to run around town all day and then come home and trying to figure it out at the end of the day. So we've been taking it this time like as best as we can.
So how is your family reacting? You mentioned that some of them are, saying this was probably not a good time to go. And it seems like you guys don't agree with that, which is great to hear that you feel like this was still a good opportunity and you didn't make a mistake. But I'm guessing that maybe your parents and your family might feel differently. They might want you to come home.
Yeah, it's definitely been a wave of their feelings. At first, they were like, definitely stay. Like, you're making the right choice. It's crazy at home and there's no reason for it. But then as things started getting more serious, more cases started popping up, and the restrictions started getting tighter, they're kind of getting a little worried and like, are you guys okay there? Like, do you really feel safe? Is it healthy there? Can you stay healthy? But we really feel like 100% safe. And compared to some of the other places that we've been, like, had we been stuck there, it would have been a completely different story. So we are very lucky that we're staying at like a very nice hotel in a very nice neighborhood. And that helps a lot. And it helps ease my parents' minds as well. So sometimes they wish we were home because they're bored and lonely. And sometimes they wish they were with us because it's not as crazy here, like on a national level.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. And there's some precautions being taken in Southeast Asia that are not being taken in the United States in terms of checking people's temperature before they enter different places. But they're also in your area not closing down public areas, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so they've shut down a couple of specific things, like the movies or cinemas have been closed down. Museums have been shut down, although Angkor Wat, the largest religious monument, is still open to the public. It is outdoor and a lot easier to like stay far apart, so I guess that makes sense. And they said that they've shut down bars, but we haven't really, I guess all these bars that we've been seeing are considered restaurants and they haven't been closed down yet. Just people who own them personally are opting to close them because they don't feel safe. So we have started to see the community reacting rather than the government.
And how are you making sure that you have access to things like food and toiletries in the case that you would at some point be quarantined into the hotel?
We're lucky enough to have a grocery store that's just like 1 block away from us that we have been walking to. A lot of the locals in Cambodia shop at markets or grow their own food or have their own animals on their own farms. So going to the grocery store is like just for Westerners mostly. All the people that we see in there are from somewhere in Europe or somewhere in America that live here now permanently and are shopping at the grocery store. So we don't run into very many people there, and it has been staying open. plenty of food on the shelves. But if we were to be quarantined here, we're lucky to have some of the workers at the hotel have been offered to cook us food and bring it to us, or just bring us groceries if we need it. If we don't feel that we want to go out, if we just feel safer in here and decide to self-quarantine completely, they'd be more than willing to bring us food and groceries.
That's really great to hear. And are you concerned at all about the hospital care system in Cambodia? I don't know much about that. Is the quality high or similar to Western hospitals?
Definitely not similar to Western hospitals or what we've been used to growing up in California. We've definitely had a much higher quality of care there. We do know where the local hospitals are if we were to need them. Just fingers crossed really that we don't, because it's not the highest level of care.
Gotcha. And in terms of, you mentioned some other expats at the grocery store. Do you have an expat community that you're interacting with here, or are you mostly staying connected through internet with people back home?
We've mostly been staying connected through the internet with people from home. Actually, a couple of days into our trip when we got here, we met up with someone we met on Instagram, another couple, and that was really nice. They were here at the same time just by happenstance. So we met up with them for a couple of days before they flew home back to London. So we've been staying in touch with them and have been FaceTiming with them. And that's kind of nice because they know what we're going through here in Cambodia and they know what they're going through at home. So it's been nice to be able to connect with them, and then talking to my family basically like every other day.
Great. That's good that you're staying connected even though you're far away. And honestly, if you live next door to them but in a different house, you'd probably be FaceTiming too. That's what we're doing with our family, even though we live in the same state, because we're trying not to mix together or get into any groups or gatherings just to prevent any spread of the virus.
Yeah, no, it's actually been kind of a silver lining to it all. Is we've been trying to figure out how to play games with my mom back home because she loves playing games. And we're like, oh, we can't play card games because then you need cards too. And now all these apps are popping up so you can play games with people over the internet because people are, like you said, next door playing games online. And now we're able to do that with my mom, across the world.
That's really fun. I feel like this is an opportunity for us to figure out how we can be more connected as a global society. A lot of people are learning that they can telecommute at jobs that they were told there was no way that they could work remotely. You can stay connected with your friends who might live in completely different states or places just as easily as you can stay connected to the people that live in your town. So I think that's a really great upside of this. Even though obviously this is a really serious situation, we can see some positives in the way that COVID-19 is affecting our lives.
It's hard to get sucked into the negativity of it all, but just finding those little positives kind of help make the world go round right now.
Do you mind talking about the business for a second?
Sure.
So you just started your business, The Passport Couple, in the beginning of the year, and you were starting your travels and then COVID-19 hit. So is your business being affected? Are you pivoting your business model? What effects are you seeing happen because of this global pandemic?
Honestly, we are still in the growing stages. We are just trying to get that community and that following on our social networks. So Instagram and YouTube are our two main spots to find that community. So we've really been using this time to focus on growing that community because honestly, we're going to need that community before we can even start making money or start working with brands and partnering with hotels and experiences like we're planning to do. So although we're not able to start those partnerships yet, we are able to work on the front end a lot more full force right now and growing our following. So when borders start opening up and when people start feeling comfortable again to travel and to work with people, we'll be ready and we'll have much more of a community and a following behind us so that we can jump right in and hopefully have a little bit of advantage because we're already here rather than the people who went home and have to come back out and work with those brands. We're already right here and we're willing to start working with them right away.
That's really good to hear. It sounds like you're able to focus on your growth, which is usually the initial stage anyway, but you also had that month of travel before you ended up locked down to create some content, to be able to give out some videos and some photos to your audiences on Instagram and YouTube, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Today I was actually going through all of the pictures and videos that we've taken since we left and even before we left just to get some more backstory to us and seeing hopefully we have enough to last as long as this goes and trying to figure out how we can make new content while we're in quarantine.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sure you could talk about your experience in quarantine, and that would be also really interesting to people. I was so interested to get on this call with you and find out what your life is like, because it seems like it would be a little bit stressful and to be in a different country and to have just started a new travel business and not be able to travel. So sharing that experience with people who are curious like me, I think would be a really great content opportunity.
Absolutely. And it's been interesting, like you said, I'm so interested in learning about others who are normally traveling weekly or monthly and seeing what they're doing and how they're dealing. Because I think with the whole travel community, you get kind of restless. You want to get out there and you want to go experience something new, some new restaurant, some new meal, some new activity. And it's hard, like, all right, let's cook rice and chicken again. That's all we know. So just finding new ways to get out your energy while still inside.
Yeah, especially if you're used to full-time travel, I'm sure that was feeling like you just screeched to a halt. Last question, I just wanted to see if you guys are doing any mid to long-term plans in case this goes with the kind of less optimistic estimates that the virus will continue to be an issue until a vaccine is developed in like 10 to 18 months.
Right. So if that happens, we're probably going to go home just because our visa is only for 30 days right now and we can't extend it longer, but any longer than 2 or 3 months, I think we're going to start running into some issues there. So I don't know how those issues will be handled given the current situation or how the government plans to allow extensions since lots of offices are closing. So that is something we still have to work out. Otherwise, we're just hoping that some borders will open up somewhere and we'll be able to kind of hop into the next country as soon as we can, given that everything's safe and welcome.
Would you be considering doing a visa run and then returning to Cambodia or moving to a different area to do an adventure there?
We'd be willing to move on to the next country if we can. And the only thing, there's no countries around us right now that are open at all. So doing a visa run would be hard. So if any country opens up in the nearby area, we'll probably just end up going there so we can get some sort of travel and something new. Again, just as long as everything is safe and they're ready to start accepting travelers.
Yeah, and I think this is probably pretty unprecedented in terms of expats being stuck in countries that they're not residents or citizens in. So it'll be interesting to see how different countries handle that. I think you will be successful in figuring that out, and it sounds like you guys are safe and healthy where you are, and this hasn't really thrown a major wrench into your plans. You're still able to work on your business, and having to stay in Cambodia for a longer period of time than you were originally planned isn't the end of the world for what your travel plans were, what your lifestyle goals were, right? So that's really promising to hear that.
It can definitely be seen that way in some lights, but we're just trying to stay as positive as we can. And we're super lucky to still be able to stay here and that we don't have to worry about losing our jobs since we technically have already lost them. And we're working on this new business together. So we have been counting our blessings as they come. And we're just really happy to be safe and in a place that we can call home for a little bit.
That's great. Thank you so much, Alicia. Where can people go online to find out more about you?
Definitely head over to our Instagram. That's our main platform right now. It's going to be at The Passport Couple. We just started up our website at thepassportcouple.com. And then we're on YouTube, The Passport Couple. Same handle and everything, so it should be easy to find us. But check us out on Instagram.
Great. Thanks so much, Alicia.
Thank you so much.
Now, let's go to Michelle's interview, where she shares all about how she decided to head home and what 14-day quarantine was like. Hi, Michelle. Thank you for coming back onto the Find Your Freedom podcast.
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me back.
It's great to catch up with you again. You were my interview guest on episode 6, and we talked about your lifestyle in semi-retirement. And so I'm very excited to catch up with you and see kind of really relevantly right now how COVID has affected you and your lifestyle and your finances.
And we're recording this on the 1st of April. At least it is the 1st of April for me. I think you're still on the 31st of March.
I am still on the 31st of March. Yeah, we're also on opposite sides of the world right now. So where are you right now?
So I'm in a place called Adelaide in Australia, South Australia. And it was a very quick trip to make it here. I had been in New Zealand for about the last 8 months. So this pesky virus of the times has upset my plans a little bit. But here we are in Australia.
So you were in New Zealand for work, is that right? Can you tell me a little bit about what your plans were and then how they had to change?
As you mentioned, I'm semi-retired, and I think the listeners that would have heard me on episode 6 would have heard me say that usually means I work about 6 months of the year and then take the other 6 months off. I was in a work phase of my year over in New Zealand, so I was doing a contract of about 8 months long, so I nearly made it to the end of it. Working in the events field, obviously it's not a great time to be in events at the moment, given that so many things are cancelling and people are not able to gather. So the event that I was delivering made it about halfway through before COVID kind of overwhelmed the landscape and the event cancelled, and it was obvious that it was best for me to get back to a home base that I was going to be willing to spend my time in for multiple months ahead. So at that point, I had planned to do my next 6 months of travel around US and Canada and potentially even UK, but for now that's gone out of the window, shall we say.
And so you actually had to return from New Zealand back to Australia. When you were starting to hear the news and then your event was starting to be canceled, what did that thought process look like? And what was your timeline from hearing about the country closures that were occurring and the possibility that you would have to shelter in place where you were versus return home, and the time period that you decided it was time to get on a plane and go back to Australia?
Well, I think for everyone it happened really quickly. I remember hearing kind of late February, early March that there was this virus going around. It hadn't really hit New Zealand yet, where I was staying. And I'm fortunate as an Australian citizen, I don't need a visa necessarily to stay in New Zealand. But it was only, a week or so after that things really started to escalate. We started to hear about some cases going on. Fortunately, the New Zealand government are really proactive in wanting to lock things down in order to control things really quickly. But what that meant was I had to make a really quick decision. Am I going to want to stay in New Zealand, potentially not working, given that my contract was about to end anyway? And because I actually tend to house sit full time, usually looking after people's houses when they're traveling, given that they weren't traveling, all of my future house sits were also cancelling. So I was looking at potentially being unemployed and homeless in a country that's not necessarily my own. As beautiful as New Zealand was, I thought it was better to get myself out of there. So it was really, once I made that decision, I ended up leaving about 3 days later, unfortunately, with my workplace being very generous in agreeing to letting me do that work remotely that I had left. So here I am now back in Adelaide, staying in my parents' house for now. So very fortunate in that I do have that home base that I can return to and pay, just modest board instead of rent that I would have had to have taken out if I was back in New Zealand. So it really did happen quite quickly. It was 3 days between me making that decision and then me getting on a flight. It was at the time where Australia was looking at closing its borders. Also, all of the international flights, including from New Zealand, were looking at cancelling only about a week after that. So I made the decision at the right time. It does mean that now I find myself back in Adelaide. I'm on self-isolation. It's a requirement of the Australian government at this time. So I'm about day 11 now of 14 days of required self-isolation. Fortunately, no symptoms or anything like that. It is a good precautionary measure, but it does mean I've had a lot of bedroom time to be thinking about plans for the future now.
What was your living situation in New Zealand? Were you in a house sit when you made that decision to leave and come back to Australia?
I was, yes. So I was in the middle of an 8-day house sit. So I have tended to do short house sits in New Zealand, usually about a week or two at a time. Yeah, I had enjoyed being in lots of different places in the city of Auckland where I was based. So I had tended to do those short house sits of about a week to 2 weeks long. It was fortunate in that, given that things escalated so quickly, I was able to end the 8-day house sit that I was doing safely. Those travellers did return home and did on arrival have to self-isolate when they weren't expecting to once they actually left for their holiday. But it meant that I didn't have that commitment or a personal house that I needed to pack up other than my bags from the houses that I'd been carrying around. So I was able to get out of there pretty quickly. It's an advantage of being a somewhat nimble nomad. I don't have a lot of possessions. I didn't have many with me. So it meant that I didn't have that extra hassle when I needed to leave quickly.
And it sounded like it worked out as well. You weren't paying rent. You didn't have to break a lease or just pay for something that you weren't using. You were able to work with the people who owned the home to make sure that they were home to sit their own house, and then you could head safely back home. So it sounds like that actually worked out quite well. I could see other situations where people were on more longer term financial commitments to housing that would be more challenging. So you definitely have a very flexible setup with how you were managing your work and living situation.
I was very fortunate in that I could leave pretty quickly, given that while there are disadvantages of not having a home base, particularly for the 8 months that I was there in New Zealand, this was certainly an unexpected advantage in these circumstances.
And you returned to your childhood home to stay with your parents, right? I've been following along with you on social media. And so you want to tell me a little bit about your experience being back at home? And I know you're paying room and board and you're essentially isolated to your bedroom. So tell me just a little bit about that.
I have to say it's a very humbling thing to have to return to your parents' house in my mid-30s now. But it is, again, one of the resources that I was looking at having. It's not just all about financial capital in these circumstances. It's also about things like the social capital that you have, so the relationships and the networks and so on. So I was able to move back here, at least for the next little while, before we all drive each other a little bit crazy, I'm sure. But yeah, for the relatively cheap room and board that I'm paying, I'm getting some really fun room service by mum. And so because we're taking the self-isolation rules pretty seriously, I get my food dropped on a tray at my door. And yeah, it's been pretty good standard of meals now, particularly because mum knows that I'm sharing them on social media. So she's maintaining a pretty good quality of them. So it's pretty fun to see what she comes up with each day, including nice little notes and so on. So I'm definitely feeling a lot of nostalgia for my childhood now. Progressing a little bit in that relationship right now. It's a little bit funny, but as soon as I'm allowed out of my bedroom a little bit more in the next few days, or symptoms being clear for me, yeah, I'm really looking forward to spending more time with my parents. There's a really good article that I have enjoyed from a website called Wait But Why, called The Tail End. I'm not sure if you've come across this, but so this article talks about the different experiences and how they're portioned out across your lifetime. So as much as I might be in my mid-30s, there's certain things that I may actually have used up a lot of the proportion of the experience that I'm going to have. And unfortunately, it is a thing that with relationships, and often with relationships with parents, at this point, I've probably used, 90% of the time, in-person time with my parents that I would likely have in our lifetimes together. So till age 18, you're always living at home, you're spending all your evenings with them and so on. So it's a little bit front loaded in that end. So the article being called The Tail End does make you realize that sometimes, even though you've got many, many years ahead, the actual in-person FaceTime that you have with certain people is coming to the tail end. So I'm kind of pleased to be reclaiming some of that time with them at the moment, even though it's very strange circumstances.
It's unusual and unexpected, but it's kind of nice because the time that we do have with our parents is precious and could be shorter than we feel like it would because we have so much of our lives ahead of us. And so I think that's kind of a really good upside. And I think that's something in general that is something good that's come out of this is families are spending a lot more time together. Certainly there is isolation where people who don't live in the same household are unable to see each other, which is very unfortunate. But our paradigm where we spend more time at work than we do at home has flipped on its head. And so a lot of people are experiencing spending much more time with their family than with their coworkers now. And it's changing the way that we operate as people and as a society, and it's something that's really difficult to work through and figure out how to make it work. But we can be grateful for that opportunity for those of us who have it, to spend that time with people that we don't get to see as much as we used to.
I'll be fascinated to know after this is all over and people start to return to offices and so on, whether people will be more reluctant to want to do those full-time hours and be away from family a lot more now that they've often had a taste of working from home and being around the people that they love. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how this shifts and actually have more people join the FIRE movement, if we're honest.
I tend to agree, and I think another piece of it that I like to talk about with you is the financial part. So you had to unexpectedly leave where you were and figure out a flexible work arrangement with your employer. And now you have a month left in your contract and you're going to be unemployed for a period of time. How financially have you prepared for that? And do you have any concerns given that we're in kind of a downturn in the global economy right now, and many people are experiencing unemployment?
So as I mentioned, my industry is in events and festivals. And again, that's not having a great time right now with everyone staying at home and not so much going out and in mass gatherings to enjoy musicians and artists and so on. So I admittedly am fortunate in that I was always anticipating to have another 6 months ahead of me of just mere travel. So I do have all of those travel funds that can now be channeled towards, well, stay-at-home funds, I guess. I did also have emergency funds, which is an important component of my FIRE portfolio, is having some cash and emergency funds. So that itself was going to hold me over for at least 6 months and potentially longer if I am living in cheaper accommodation. So I feeling okay financially, at least for the next year or so. And I am really excited now in amongst all of this to actually be looking at doing some more remote freelance opportunities. It's something that I had been thinking about for a long time. Most of my work has been seasonal, but still turning up to an office and being location dependent. But I think we talked about in our interview on your episode 6 that it was something that I was wanting to start dabbling in, but now is definitely the time. So I'm looking into virtual assistant courses and other online training to skill up, but also realizing that I do actually have a wealth of skills there already. And so wanting to kind of use those in a way that's going to help people, particularly from this online space now. So I'm excited about this forced time to actually knuckle down and really get into that, which I may not necessarily have otherwise pushed ahead as quite so quickly if I'd been traveling only. So having a home base means that I'll definitely be dedicating some more time to that. And I guess it's worth talking about. So we talked about social capital a moment ago, but I wanted to also mention that there's an article by a blogger called Rich and Resilient Living, which explores 8 forms of capital. And while we in the FIRE movement, we often concentrate on the financial capital elements, so making sure we've got our finances all sorted, there are so many other forms of wealth that actually make a more rounded and positive lifestyle. So things like that social capital that I mentioned, also intellectual capital. So all of the skills and knowledge that I've learnt and built up over time, including also experiential knowledge as well. So the experience of being able to nut things out and learn things by doing. It's also forms of wealth that can be used at these times. You need to think about all of the different resources that are available to you. Also material wealth as well, like what if you do have a home, that's going to be a resource to. Also any equipment that you might have. You've got your TV that you can be binging on Netflix is great at this time, but then also if you've got your laptop and so on, just think about how you can use those and leverage those to be earning and creating more wealth at this time. So there's lots of different avenues out there. Don't always necessarily think about just the finances.
I think that's such great advice, because in times where we're not financially stressed and we're not in uncertain situations, we rarely think about the resources that we have at our disposal. And I'm seeing a lot of creativity come out of these uncertain times where people are figuring out ways to repurpose the things that they have instead of having to go out and buy something new, because we don't want to be out in the world if we don't have to be. People are learning how to cook who don't typically cook at home because that's something that we have to do. And also people who may have lost their jobs or seen a significant scale back in their income are figuring out how to pivot. And plenty of people that I've talked to who work online, who freelance, and who are self-employed or entrepreneurs are having to change the way that they are working and their business model and pivot to do things slightly differently to remain relevant in times that have changed. And that is something where we end up leaning back on our intellectual capital and also on our social capital. Our networks, the people that we know, are a huge source of assistance in times like these. So we can't discount those types of resources just for all this advice that we're hearing about. You have to have an emergency fund. You need to have money. And of course, money is an important tool to have, but it's not the only tool in our toolbox.
And also Vicki Robin, who famously wrote the book Your Money or Your Life, she also talks about this ABCs of wealth, which is very much related to these 8 forms of capital. So looking at your abilities, belongings, all of those relationships and so on, and also community. So the wider communities in which you live, the cities and countries and all of their resources that they have too. So I think there's bigger ways of looking at things beyond, as you say, the emergency funds and the other advice that we personal finance bloggers talk about.
And I heard a interview with Vicki Robin where she comments that she's not a financial expert. She's a resources expert, because there's more to the resources that every human being has than just money. And she almost feels like people got a more limited idea than she was trying to get across with Your Money or Your Life, because while money is a really important factor in the larger idea of our life, it is not the only thing. And so now I've seen a lot of the writing that she does and speaking that she does is centered around community-based resources, self-sufficiency, working outside of yourself and outside of your individual resources in a more community-based way to be able to compound not only your impact and your security, but the way that you live that can help and impact other people as well. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about with your travel, or with how being semi-nomadic has been a unique experience in this very unprecedented time that we're in?
It does mean that there is some uncertainty around where I'm going to live in the immediate future. As much as I can stay at my parents' house, I would like to at least be a little bit more independent in my mid-30s here. So obviously there's limited opportunities for house sitting right now. So I may end up taking on a short-term lease somewhere, or share housing again, which I've done for a number of different years in years past. And yeah, just trying to work out when is safe next to travel. It's really a strange time. I would really like to attend some of the rescheduled events that I was hoping to be at in May. So things including the Financial Freedom Summit and an event called TravelCon, which are now looking at being in September. So fingers are crossed that everything will have settled down by then. But I am not feeling that bad if that doesn't go ahead. I'm kind of enjoying now this time to be a little bit still and a little bit more reflective, and just being okay with the fact that 2020 just might not be my year, or certainly anyone's year at this point. Admittedly, I think it would make it a lot harder for me right now if I wasn't traveling. If other people were able to, I think the FOMO would get me. But given that we're all in this together, and there's that sense of solidarity, I do feel fine about the situation right now, as fine as we can in the circumstances.
That's great. Thank you for sharing your experience with how COVID-19 has affected your life. And where can people go online to find more about you?
You'll find me at my blog, frugalityandfreedom.com. I'm also pretty active on Instagram, Frugality and Freedom, and also Twitter, Frugality Freedom with no O in the freedom.
Okay, and we will link to all of that in the show notes. Thank you, Michelle.
To check out the show notes for this episode, which includes links to resources mentioned in today's interviews and where you can learn more about Alicia and Michelle, go to 20free.co/episode 17. That's the word 20, FREE.co/episode 17. I want this to be more than just a podcast for listening to, so I'm making it a do-cast, where you're getting information from the podcast that you can take action on to create real outcomes in your life. I call these power moves. If you implement even one of these tactics into your life, you're taking a powerful step towards finding your freedom. Today, I want to share power moves for travelers who find themselves suddenly stationary. Here are 6 ways you can use your time in quarantine to get ready to travel again in the future. Power move number 1, get organized for future travel. Now is a time to make travel easier for yourself in the future.
If you travel a lot, having a pre-travel and post-travel checklist is a lifesaver. It will keep you from forgetting to do or pack something before leaving, and it will remind you of everything you want to do when you get back, like process the hundreds of photos that you took on your trip. A pre-travel checklist should include items from booking hotels, flights, and transportation to emptying your fridge, SD cards, and trash cans. My pre-travel checklist has a closing down the house section on it, where it lists things like checking for wet laundry in the washer, cleaning the kitchen, turning down the temperature, and turning off the lights in order to save energy. Plus, it's always nice to come back to a clean house. My post-travel checklist includes items like picking up mail, letting people know that I've returned, unpacking, emptying my SD cards, and deleting offline maps and downloaded books or movies. A week after I return, I check on a Word Wallet to make sure that I received points for all of my hotel stays, car rentals, and more. During quarantine is a great time to sign up for a Word Wallet, which keeps all of your reward balances from hotels, airlines, and rental car companies in one place. I've included a link in the show notes that will give you a free upgrade to a Word Wallet Plus if you're a first-time user. Now is also a good time to check for recent trips and make sure that you've received credits and points including bonus offers. If you haven't, you can dispute this with the provider by submitting a receipt. Finally, make sure you keep a record of expiration dates on essential travel documents such as your passport, global entry, or TSA PreCheck. Remember that most countries require your U.S. passport to have at least 6 months of validity beyond the dates of your trip, and some airlines will not let you board an international flight if your passport is expiring in less than 6 months. Keep in mind that right now there are significant delays in the United States document renewals due to coronavirus, so only submit for renewal if your documents are about to expire. Power move number 2. Analyze your travel credit cards. If you're a travel hacker, take a look at your travel credit cards to make sure that they are still holding value for you. Also, examine if you've taken advantage of all the benefits of each card. Do you know when your annual fees are due and how much they are? Or if there have been any changes to the terms of your credit card since you got it? As an example, the Chase Sapphire Reserve card had an update earlier this year that increased its annual fee from $450 to $550. This increased fee also came with added benefits like a year of Lyft Pink and a year of DoorDash's Dash Pass, as well as an annual $60 statement credit for DoorDash purchases. Sign up for new benefits that you haven't already, such as lounge access and free services. Also take note of items that result in a statement credit, such as travel statement credits. If you won't be buying any travel items before your annual fee is due and that statement credit resets, check whether gift cards to things like airlines, car sharing services, or house rental services like Airbnb will qualify for the statement credit, so you can save the money for future travel. If you're not sure that the card is still holding value for you compared to the annual fee, first call and request that they waive your annual fee. Sometimes they'll waive it completely. I called about the increased annual fee for the Chase Sapphire Reserve, and while they didn't waive the entire fee, I was able to get a statement credit for the $100 fee increase. You can also downgrade a credit card to one without a fee instead of canceling it fully. Be sure to find out how to keep your points and whether downgrading to a different card affects your future sign-up bonus eligibility before closing or downgrading any card. Also, keep in mind how long you've had the card account open because it may affect your credit score negatively to close an account that you've had open for a long time. Power move number 3. Lock down your budget. While we're locked down in life, we can also lock down our budgets. Now's a good time to take a look at what you normally spend and decide what can be canceled, suspended, or changed. This is important whether your income has stayed consistent or decreased, because either way, there are some things that you probably aren't using right now. First, review your credit card statements for subscriptions and monthly fees. Cancel or suspend subscriptions you aren't using now, such as music, TV, audiobooks, and more. If you only listen to Spotify or Audible on the way to work or while you travel and you're stuck at or working from home, you should cancel or change your subscriptions. Audible has an option to downgrade your subscription to get credits for every other month instead of every month. You can also call your gym to see if you can suspend your gym membership payments while the gym is closed. My gym, Planet Fitness, is doing this automatically. The same goes if you have any other memberships to businesses that are currently closed, such as movie theaters and yoga studios. You can also look into decreasing your payments on things like student loans. Federal student loan payments and interest have already been suspended by the United States federal government until September 30th of this year. If you have privately held student loans, work with your servicer to see if you can decrease or defer your payments if necessary.
Finally, cancel or suspend insurances that you are not currently using, like travel or profession-specific insurance. Call your car insurance and ask them to adjust your rate if your mileage has significantly decreased due to working from home. Or park your car in your driveway or garage and take it off insurance entirely. Only do this if you will not be using your car at all. Power move number 4, minimalize your stuff. As a traveler, you know that traveling light is always easier. Take a look at the things you usually travel with and decide whether each item gets enough use to justify carrying it around everywhere. You can also do this with items at your home base. If you travel a lot and aren't home much, or if you're spending quarantine in your childhood bedroom, this is a great time to minimalize those items that you don't see very often at all. If you haven't used it the whole time you've been away, do you really need it? Rather than throwing things out, sell them for some extra cash, donate them to someone who could use them, or recycle them. Power move number 5, develop location-independent income. If you are not already a full-time traveler or nomad but want to become one, now might be the time to focus on developing location-independent income. That could mean starting to build your freelance portfolio or monetizing your website. Consider applying for remote jobs that you could take anywhere around the world, since right now a lot of jobs are remote due to coronavirus. If you prove that you can excel at your work while remote, you may be able to maintain your remote work arrangement after the lockdown is over. Some other ideas for remote side income include teaching English online, virtual assistant work, freelance or contract work, and creating and selling online products such as ebooks or printables. Power move number 6, explore your own neighborhood. Even though you can't explore the world right now, you can still explore your neighborhood. Whether you are sheltering in place in a country that is relatively new to you or staying locked down in the home that you've lived for years, you can still explore. Taking walks around the block will have multiple benefits, including fresh air, exercise, sunshine, and a feeling of adventure. I mean it. I've been walking around my town for several times a day, and I've seen things that I've never noticed in 4 years of living here. Plus, I found out that a pizzeria I love is doing $8 large pizzas on Wednesdays. Score! If you take the perspective of being a tourist in your own town, you can find some adventure just beyond your doorstep. That is the 6th and final power move from this episode about COVID-19 and travel. You can find a free download of pre-travel and post-travel checklists in the show notes at www.20free.co/episode 17. Need someone to talk with about recent changes in your finances due to COVID-19? Connect with me on a free 10-minute coaching call at 20free.co/moneycoaching and we'll discuss how I can help. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you're subscribed to the Find Your Freedom podcast on whatever app you're using to listen to this episode. Do me a favor and also leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Go to 20free.co/iTunes to be redirected to the page on Apple Podcasts where you can leave your rating and review. I really appreciate it. If you think this episode would help someone you know, please share it with a friend. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Find Your Freedom podcast. My name is Becky. You can connect with me on Instagram and Twitter at 20freeco and sign up for free resources and email updates at www.20free.co. That's the word 20, FREE.co. I'll talk to you next week on another episode of the Find Your Freedom podcast.